I never thought a backyard barbecue could break your heart in plain daylight. It started with laughter, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Kayla, my daughter-in-law, had her wine glass raised high, and her voice even higher, telling some story about a friend who finally convinced her mother-in-law to move into assisted living. Then she said it, just loud enough to quiet the breeze. She could disappear, and no one would miss her. Then she laughed. But it wasn't just her, it was everyone. My son Jeremy chuckled low like it was some harmless punchline. A few others let out little cough laughs. Even my granddaughter Ava glanced around nervously, unsure what to do. No one looked at me. So I didn't give them the satisfaction of flinching. I just nodded, like she'd said something about the weather. That's how you survive a moment like that. You let the shame pass right through you without grabbing hold. You pretend you've heard worse. And Lord knows I have. But inside, I was gone. Something in me closed. Quietly. Permanently. The day carried on. The grill smoked. The kids jumped in the pool. Kayla flitted about in her designer sundress, topping off drinks like nothing had happened. Jeremy gave me a lazy hug goodbye, the kind you give a neighbor, not your mother. When I got home, I took off my earrings, laid them on the tray beside the sink like I always do. I changed out of my clothes, folded them neatly, and hung them back up. Habit. Always keep things tidy, no matter how messy people get. Then I stood in front of the dresser, where the old family photo sat. All four of us at the lake that summer. Jeremy was just a teenager then, before Kayla, before the distance. Ava on my lap, all curls and chubby cheeks. My late husband Richard had his hand on my shoulder. We looked happy. Maybe we even were. I picked up the frame and held it for a long time. Then I walked it over to the linen closet and placed it face down behind the spare sheets. That night, I didn't sleep much. I laid there thinking about every little cut that had led to that moment. The missed phone calls, the birthday they forgot, the Christmas dinner I wasn't invited to because the house was too full. And now, the joke, meant to humiliate. You know, people think cruelty always comes loud and ugly, but sometimes it sounds like laughter over plastic cups and potato salad. When the sun came up, I made my tea like I always do. Chamomile. No sugar. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand and took out the folder Richard left me before he passed. Inside was the number for Raymond Wells, his old law partner, and the copy of my will I hadn't looked at since Ava was in diapers. I sat at the kitchen table, tea cooling by my elbow, and read every word of that document. Jeremy's name came up again and again. The house, the accounts, the lake cabin, even the old coin collection Richard swore would be worth something one day. I didn't cry. I just reached for a pen and scratched one word in the margin beside Jeremy's name. Why? Then I called Raymond. He answered on the second ring. And when he asked how I'd been, I said, "Raymond, I think it's time I made some changes. Do you have room for me this afternoon?" There was a pause, then his gentle voice. "Of course, Beverly. Come in when you're ready." After I hung up, I sat there a while longer, watching the breeze stir the curtains. And then I went to my closet and pulled out my small navy suitcase, the one I hadn't used since Richard's funeral. I packed slowly. One pair of slacks, 2 good blouses, my slippers, the worn paperback I always reread when I need to feel steady. On the notepad by the fridge, I wrote, "Thank you for dinner. I won't burden you further." No drama, no pleading, just a simple truth. I would not be laughed at again. By the time the sun cleared the maple in my backyard, I'd already packed, dressed, and stripped the bed. It wasn't a dramatic escape. There were no tears, no slamming doors, just quiet footsteps and the sound of a suitcase zipper. I left the house key on the counter next to the half-empty fruit bowl and my note, "Thank you for dinner. I won't burden you further." That's all it said, and I meant every word of it. People always expect old women to go out wailing. But me? I prefer clean exits. Less to clean up afterward. Linda, my neighbor and bridge partner, was waiting with the passenger door open in her Buick. She didn't ask questions, just patted the seat beside her and said, "I changed the sheets in the guest room and got your brand of tea. You'll have your own bathroom." That's the kind of woman Linda is. Been through 2 divorces and a hip replacement. Still beats me at gin rummy twice a week. She knows better than to pry when someone's carrying a quiet grief. We pulled away just as the sprinklers kicked on across the Doyle front lawn. I watched the water arc over Jeremy's perfect rose beds. He always did like appearances. The drive to Linda's felt longer than it was. Every street corner held a little ghost. School drop-offs, birthday party balloons, Ava's lemonade stand that one summer when she still ran to me with sticky fingers and dimples. I kept my gaze forward. I wasn't looking back. I couldn't afford to. When we arrived, Linda helped carry in my things, even though I told her I was fine. She rolled her eyes and said, "Humor me, Bev. I need the exercise." We settled into a rhythm quickly. I took the guest room with the bay window that overlooked her peony bushes. I made myself useful, helped fold laundry, watered her hanging plants, chopped onions when she made soup. To the outside world, it looked like a little vacation, a visit between friends. But every night, before bed, I sat with that folder from the nightstand. The will. My old bank documents. The deed to the cabin Richard had built with his own 2 hands back when gas was 89 cents, and we had dreams bigger than our mortgage. 3 days in, Jeremy finally noticed I was gone. He texted, "Hey, just saw your note. Everything okay?" Just that. "No, we miss you." No. Kayla was out of line. No apology. I stared at the message so long my tea went cold. Then I turned off my phone. Not because I was angry, but because I was done explaining my feelings to people who treated them like clutter, something to sweep under the rug. Linda noticed. "You gonna answer him?" "No," I said. "He'll follow up if he means it." But he didn't. That silence told me more than any argument ever could. Kayla hadn't just gotten bold on her own. She knew she had Jeremy's silence as her safety net. It stung, I won't lie. But hurt has a way of firming your spine. That same night, Linda and I sat on the porch swing, sipping our tea and listening to the cicadas. I told her, "I'm thinking about changing some things. Not just where I sleep, but where I leave my name." She nodded, slow, thoughtful. "You sure you're ready for that, Bev?" "Ready?" I said. "I've been ready since Kayla told a joke and the room laughed with her." Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. "Then start with that lawyer of yours." I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I felt solid. Like the ground had stopped shifting under me. The next morning I called Raymond Wells and made an appointment. And then I did something else. I opened a new bank account in my name only. Sometimes the first step in reclaiming your power is making sure no one else can spend it. Raymond Wells hadn't changed a bit. Same narrow tie. Same ancient desk that still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and lemon polish. When Richard passed, Raymond handled everything with a kind of quiet dignity that I'll never forget. He was one of the few men left who still used the word ma'am without irony. He stood when I entered. Beverly Doyle, still the steadiest voice in any room. "I don't know about that," I said, setting my purse down carefully, "but I've been through enough to know when it's time to tighten my fences." He tilted his head, watching me closely. "How bad is it?" I didn't tell him about Kayla's joke, or how Jeremy laughed, or how no one said a word afterward. Not even Ava. I just said, "That enough that I don't recognize my own son anymore." Raymond leaned back in his chair. "All right then, tell me what you need." I opened the folder I'd brought, the same one that had sat in my drawer for 10 years, untouched since Richard passed. I laid out the old will, still in good order, but hopelessly outdated. My voice didn't tremble. "I want to revise the entire estate, and I want to protect it." Raymond flipped through the pages, brow furrowed. "Your son is listed as sole beneficiary. Executor too." "I know. And you want to remove him?" "Not remove. Just rethink everything. Add layers. Add teeth." He glanced up. "This isn't just about money, is it?" "No, I said, pressing my hand to the table. It's about dignity. Mine. He tapped his pen once against the edge of the desk, a habit I remembered from years ago. I can set up a living trust. We can protect your assets while you're alive and ensure distribution on your terms. It'll take a few days, but I'll start today. Good, I nodded. Also, I want to add clauses. Nothing extreme, just clear enough to keep the vultures from circling. Raymond lifted an eyebrow. Like what? I looked him straight in the eye. Any attempt at coercion, manipulation, or undue influence voids their claim. He scribbled something down, then paused. Do you have someone else in mind for executor? Not yet, I admitted. But I will. He sat back in his chair, fingers steepled. You've been thinking about this for a while. No, I said. But I've been disrespected for a while. And now I'm thinking clearly. He gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Most people your age come in here scared. You're the first one who sounds done. I am. He closed the folder gently. This will cause a stir. I shrugged. So does any storm worth surviving. When we finished, he walked me to the door, like he always used to with Richard. I'll call when the papers are ready, he said. And Beverly, you're not wrong for doing this. Don't let anyone make you feel like you are. I smiled then. Just a little. Not for show, but because it was the first time someone said it out loud. I wasn't wrong. I drove back to Linda's in silence. No radio. Just the sound of my own breath and the hum of the road. When I got in, Linda was already setting the kettle on the stove. You look lighter, she said. I put some locks on the barn, I replied, slipping off my shoes. She didn't ask what I meant. She just poured the tea. That night, before bed, I sat by the window in my borrowed room and looked out at the neighbor's porch light across the street. I thought about every woman I'd ever known who gave too many chances, who kept shrinking themselves to fit someone else's comfort. Not me, not anymore. I'd stitched myself into their lives for years. Now I was unpicking every thread. Linda burst through the side door like she was carrying state secrets. She didn't even take off her gardening gloves. You will not believe what I just heard at the salon. Now, I'll admit, I'm not usually one for gossip, but there's a difference between gossip and reconnaissance. And when your name gets dragged through a nail painting session on a Tuesday, you have every right to know. What'd you hear? I asked, calm as you please, folding towels fresh from the dryer. Linda peeled off one glove, then the other. Kayla, talking loud like she's the only one in the room, said you were, quote, acting dramatic, and that you'd come crawling back once you ran out of places to stay. I didn't say a word. I just placed the last towel in the linen cupboard and shut the door with care. Then I laughed, quietly, but the kind of laugh that doesn't reach her eyes. Well, I said, isn't that just adorable? Linda raised an eyebrow. Adorable? Bev, she's writing you off like you're some worn-out house slipper. That's fine, I said, let her. Because the more comfortable she felt, the deeper she was sinking into her own mess. People like Kayla never see the trap when it's made of silence. They only trip once it's locked. I walked into the guest room, opened the folder from Raymond, and made my final notes. That afternoon, I signed the first set of trust documents. Everything I owned, my house, the cabin, even the dividends from Richard's old stock, was moved into a living trust with a protective clause. A firewall, Raymond had called it. I just called it peace of mind. Kayla thought I was drifting toward irrelevance. She had no idea I was redrawing the map. That evening, Linda made her famous chicken divan, and we ate on the back porch under the string lights she hung up last summer. She poured us each a glass of boxed Chardonnay and asked gently, "What's next, Bev?" I looked out across her backyard. The neighbor's sprinkler was on, catching the last of the sun. Somewhere down the street, kids were chasing fireflies. I'm going to let them get comfortable, I said, swirling the wine in my glass. People show their truest faces when they think they've already won. Linda nodded, chewing slowly. What about Ava? I sighed. That girl. Sweet, observant Ava. Always watching. Always feeling more than she lets on. She's not like the rest, I said. But she's got a front row seat. Sooner or later, she'll start seeing it for what it is. Linda leaned back and crossed her arms. You're playing a long game. I'm playing the right game, I said. The one where I don't lose myself. Later that night, I got a text from Jeremy. Just 3 words. Everything okay, Mom? I didn't answer. Not because I was trying to punish him, but because the answer didn't matter anymore. He hadn't protected me in that moment. He'd laughed. And that laugh, that betrayal disguised as casual indifference, told me everything I needed to know. Let them think I'm dramatic. Let them whisper. Because while they're talking behind my back, I'm building something in front of them they won't see coming. 3 days passed before I heard from anyone again. Not a peep from Jeremy. Not even a double check on whether I was still at the house. But Sunday morning, the phone rang while I was clipping dead blooms off Linda's petunias. Hi, Mom, Jeremy said, voice stiff like a necktie pulled too tight. Ava asked if you'd come for dinner. She misses you. I wiped my hands on a towel. That's kind of her. So you'll come? No, I said. But tell her thank you for thinking of me. He was quiet for a beat. Is this about what Kayla said? I let the silence answer. He sighed. She didn't mean it like that. It was a joke. Then you should have laughed harder, I said, and hung up. That evening, Linda and I had a quiet supper, roast chicken, steamed carrots, and a slice of lemon pie she'd picked up from the bakery downtown. She was reading the local paper aloud when my phone buzzed again. Ava. Hi, Grandma. I miss you. Mom made a weird toast tonight. I recorded it. My stomach turned. I clicked the audio file. It was faint, muffled like it was hidden under a napkin or sleeve. Kayla's voice rang out clear enough, to peace, and pruning dead branches so the garden can grow healthy. Laughter followed. Then the clink of glasses. I set the phone down slowly. Linda looked over the top of her glasses. Do I want to ask? They're getting comfortable, I murmured. Just like I hoped. Ava didn't follow up, didn't say anything more, but I could feel it in her message. She wasn't confused. She wasn't playing both sides. She was starting to see. After dinner, I went into the guest room and opened a fresh page in my notebook. I drew 2 columns. Left, intentions right, evidence. I wrote Kayla's quote under evidence. I slid the audio file into a backup folder on my computer and labeled it Garden Toast. Ava recording. I stared at that screen for a long time. They were still toasting their own cruelty like it was charming, like no one would remember the taste of it later. But Ava had recorded it. That meant everything. She might not have said the words, but she'd spoken loud and clear. She saw the cut. And she chose not to hand them the knife again. The next day, I mailed a letter to Raymond with a copy of the audio transcript, just in case. By then, I had already started preparing another letter. One Ava would receive in time, when the moment was right. Because my granddaughter needed to know that love isn't silence. Love doesn't laugh when someone disappears from the table. I didn't show up to their dinner, but my absence was the loudest voice in that house. And Ava heard it. That night, before I turned in, I folded the old family photo and placed it in the drawer beside me. Not on display. Not yet. But not discarded either. One day, I thought. Maybe one day, I'll put it back up, when it tells a different story. When the faces in that frame finally look honest again. On Wednesday morning, I got an alert from my bank. It wasn't much. Just a polite notification that someone had attempted access to a closed joint account. Jeremy's name was still attached to the old one Richard and I had opened years ago, back when just in case felt like a kindness. I'd forgotten it even existed until I sat with Raymond last week. We closed it, quietly, transferred every penny into the new trust account. Apparently, Jeremy had just remembered it. I pictured him, probably standing at the kitchen counter of that big remodeled house, tapping through a banking app, confused when the balance came up. Account not found. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Jeremy, hey, did you move the money? Is everything okay? I didn't reply. Because yes, Everything was finally okay, just not in the way he meant. Linda was stirring sugar into her coffee when I walked into the kitchen. "Looks like the money bell finally rang," I said, setting my phone down face up. She peered over her mug. "What do you want?" "To know where the cash went," I said. It's amazing how fast concern kicks in when dollars disappear. Linda gave a soft, knowing hum. "Amazing." I poured my own cup and leaned against the counter. The kitchen smelled like toast and lilacs, safe things, simple things. It was the kind of morning that once would have had me doing laundry and planning dinner for a family that never said thank you. Now I was drinking my coffee in peace, while Jeremy scrolled through his confusion and Kayla arranged her life like a Jenga tower, stacked high with assumptions and one bad move from collapse. By that afternoon, Raymond had emailed me the next set of trust documents, ones that specified conditions. Emotional mistreatment, manipulation, and coercion all voided inheritance rights. I read every word, then typed back, "Approved, proceed." Jeremy didn't text again that day, but I knew the silence wasn't peace. It was processing. That night, I sat on the back porch while Linda watered her peonies, and I remembered the first time Jeremy asked me for money. He was just out of college, working 2 part-time jobs, and trying to buy Kayla an engagement ring that cost more than his car. "Just a small loan, Mom," he'd said. "I'll pay you back." I'd written the check without hesitation. Because I believed in love. And I believed in him. He never paid it back. Not in money, not in time, not in care. Funny how something small like that grows into something you can't ignore anymore. By the time the porch light buzzed on, I had made up my mind. I wasn't just protecting the assets Richard left behind. I was protecting the parts of myself I had given freely, for years, without asking for anything in return. And now I was asking. I was asking for silence, for space, for respect, and I was getting it. Involuntarily, perhaps, but it counted all the same. It was a Friday evening when I heard the soft knock. Not the doorbell. Just 3 gentle raps on Linda's side door, the one that opens straight into the kitchen. The one we always left unlocked before sunset, like neighbors used to in the old days. I opened it, expecting a package or maybe Linda's cousin dropping by again to borrow a bunt pan. But there stood Ava, alone. No makeup. Hair pulled into a crooked ponytail like she'd done it herself in a hurry. "Hi, Grandma," I blinked, caught off guard. "Hi, baby," I said, stepping aside. She came in, slow and unsure, like she was still checking to see if she was welcome. I didn't ask questions. I just poured her a glass of lemonade and handed her a ginger cookie from the tin I keep hidden behind the tea canisters. She bit into it and looked up at me, a little shy. I wanted to see you. Mom doesn't know I'm here." I nodded. "I figured." She sat at the table and fiddled with the coaster, running her finger around the edges like she used to do when she was little. "My birthday's next week." "I know," I said softly. 18. "That's a big one." She looked up. "I want you there." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to hear how she'd ask. She cleared her throat. "I asked Mom and Dad if you could come to the dinner. They said it'd send the wrong message." She rolled her eyes. "Did it hurt you when they said that?" I asked gently. She nodded. "Yeah, but not like it used to." I walked over, sat down across from her. "You're growing up." She shrugged, blinking fast. I don't care about the drama. I want you at my table." "But," she hesitated, "it doesn't feel right having it at their house." A pause, then a smile. "I was wondering if maybe we could have it here." "At your place?" Oh, my heart. That girl could have asked for the moon, and I'd have found a way to hang it over this house. Instead, I just reached out and touched her hand. "We'll do it here," I said. "On one condition." She raised her brows. "You let me make my lemon cake with the lavender glaze. None of that store-bought stuff." Ava grinned, tears slipping out even though she tried to blink them back. She squeezed my hand. "Deal." She stayed another 15 minutes, Didn't say much, but she didn't have to. Sometimes, love sounds like silence, like a granddaughter sneaking across town to find her anchor. When she left, I stood at the window and watched her walk all the way down the street, head high. The next morning, I went to the market and picked up fresh lemons. Then I pulled the good dishes out of storage, the ones with the blue cornflowers around the rim that Richard always said were too fancy for meatloaf. This wasn't meatloaf. This was the beginning of something new. The birthday dinner wasn't going to be loud or big or full of expensive centerpieces. No clinking glasses, no pruning metaphors. Just one table, one cake, and a girl who'd chosen love over loyalty. The envelope looked official. Heavy cream cardstock. My lawyer's return address stamped in the corner. I placed it in Jeremy and Kayla's mailbox myself. Mid-morning, gloves on, hood up, quiet as a whisper, like slipping a pebble into a shoe. Inside was a single printed letter, the kind that sounds legal enough to sting, but leaves just enough room for doubt. To whom it may concern, as requested, this letter confirms that Mrs. Beverly Doyle is in the process of reassessing the distribution of her estate. At this time, primary beneficiaries may include several local nonprofit organizations and educational institutions, pending final allocation. I signed it in a blue pen. Added a flourish, just like I used to on library checkout slips. There was no real legal change inside that envelope. The real paperwork was already locked down with Raymond, tight as a drum. This was bait, nothing more. A simple nudge. By 6 p.m. that evening, Linda was frying catfish on the stovetop when I got the first call. Blocked number. I didn't answer. Then a text from Jeremy. We need to talk. 10 minutes later, another. What's this about your estate going to charity? I smiled into my cup of tea. Peppermint. Strong. 20 minutes after that, Kayla sent me her version of diplomacy. Kayla, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We should really sit down soon and clear the air. Red heart. Heart emoji. Bless her little heart. Linda read the message over my shoulder and snorted. Girl's running scared. She should be, I said, setting the phone face down. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That letter had done its job. It wasn't about the money, not really. It never had been. But they thought it was. They always had. They thought my absence meant irrelevance, that my silence was surrender. But when that letter hit their doorstep, they realized, too late, that I wasn't just gone. I was planning. They must have passed it back and forth, dissecting every line, wondering who educational institutions meant, what pending final allocation suggested. Probably assumed I was losing my mind, or worse, giving it all to the church or some cat shelter. Good. Let their imaginations do the work. By the next morning, Jeremy sent a third message, no punctuation this time. Is Ava still your heir? I deleted it, because I wasn't going to tell him that Ava wasn't just my heir. She was my legacy. Not because she'd inherit my money, but because she had the spine to walk through a burning house and choose me, and that's something money can't buy, or fake. Later that day, I walked out to my little garden and snipped 3 dahlias, bright pink, loud and lovely. I placed them in a vase by the window and thought about how quiet power is the best kind. They were panicking now, scrambling. But me? I was just arranging flowers. It was the knock that gave her away. Too polite, too rehearsed. Not the kind of knock you use on your mother-in-law's door when you love her. No, this was the kind you practice in your car mirror on the way over. The I'm not here to beg, I'm here to bond knock. I opened the door with my best porch smile, the one that hides every sharp edge behind a warm apron. There she was, Kayla Doyle, holding a bouquet of grocery store roses like they weren't still wrapped in the cellophane sleeve. Beverly, she chirped, a little too high. I thought I'd stop by. I know we've had our differences. Come in, I said, not moving. Just enough to make her hesitate before stepping inside. She handed me the roses like they were some rare token of peace. They're pink. I remembered you like pink. I do, I said, and placed them upside down in the sink. I'd dry them later. Dead flowers last longer than fake intentions. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking around like she hadn't memorized every inch of this house back when Jeremy and I still spoke without pretense. I motioned toward the table. "Sit, I'll make tea." She followed like a woman walking into court. As I filled the kettle, I watched her reflection in the glass of the china cabinet. She crossed her legs, then uncrossed them, smoothed her skirt, checked her phone, then tucked it away. I brought out the good porcelain. "The real stuff," she noticed. "Wow, this is beautiful. From Richard's mother?" I nodded. "She gave it to me the day I married into the Doyle name. Said, 'Don't let them forget you came with a spine.'" Kayla blinked, smiled. "That brittle kind." Once we were both seated, she dove in. "Look, Beverly," she said, stirring her tea though I hadn't offered sugar. "I know the past few weeks have been tense, and maybe I was out of line at the barbecue. It was meant to be a joke, really." "Oh," I laughed. I said calmly. "Just later, in private." That made her shift. She tried again. "Jeremy's been worried about you." I tilted my head. "Worried? That's new." "Well, we heard there might be changes happening. With your estate." "Word travels fast," I said. "Especially when it passes through people who've never asked what I wanted until now." She placed her cup down carefully. "We're just concerned. You've always been so generous. With Ava, especially." There it was, a slip. They weren't here for peace. They were here for position. "I still am generous," I said, leaning in just slightly. "Just wiser." Kayla's jaw tensed. "Beverly, we're family." I sipped my tea. "And families, as you once said, need pruning. For health." Her cheeks flushed. She stood too fast, nearly knocking the spoon off her saucer. "Well," she said, straightening her coat, "I just wanted to say we care. And I hope we can move forward." I walked her to the door. "I'm sure we will. One direction or another." She paused. "Will you be at Ava's birthday?" "No," I said, then smiled. "She'll be here." That shut her up. She left without hugging me, which was the most honest thing she did all day. I watched her walk down the steps, phone already in hand. Probably texting Jeremy, probably rattling off what little she learned. But what she didn't realize was, I'd already won. She brought flowers. I gave her nothing but tea. And yet she left more desperate than she came. Ava's birthday was on a Saturday. By Wednesday, I'd already finished the cake recipe card in my best handwriting and tucked it in the envelope. Not a gift card. Not a check. Not jewelry. This wasn't that kind of gift. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, sealed with a gold sticker from a roll I'd kept since Richard's retirement party. It had a soft weight to it. Not heavy enough to be money, but important enough to stir curiosity. On the front, I wrote in blue ink, "Ava, open after dinner." I dropped it off at her school. Didn't mail it. Didn't send it with Linda. I handed it to the front office secretary myself and said it was a birthday delivery from her grandmother. The woman smiled and said, "How sweet," but I could tell from the look on her face she was curious too. Let them all wonder. Saturday evening came. I didn't go to their house. Wasn't invited, of course, but even if I had been, I wouldn't have stepped one foot over that threshold. Instead, I sat on Linda's back porch with a cup of cocoa and a blanket around my legs. We played gin rummy by candlelight while the wind stirred the lilac bushes. At exactly 7:46 p.m., my phone buzzed. Just one message. "Ava." I opened it. No emoji. No explanation. I set the phone down and let the quiet sink in. Linda looked at me over her cards. "So, it's done?" I nodded. "It's done." Inside that envelope, Ava had found the latest copy of my will and trust, legally executed, signed, and witnessed, notarized, ironclad. It named her as the sole heir, the house, the lake cabin, the family coin collection, even Richard's old fishing journal with the taped-in Polaroids and scribbled notes on trout patterns. All hers. Not out of spite, but Out of recognition. Recognition that she saw me, that she chose me, that she stood up, in quiet ways, where her parents had chosen silence and sarcasm. There was one line in the letter that mattered most. I'd handwritten it at the bottom in the same blue pen. Because love is not what we say in public. It's what we protect in private. I didn't need a response. I just needed her to know. I went to bed early that night, but sleep didn't come easy. My mind wandered, picturing that dinner table. The clink of silverware. The moment Ava slid the envelope from her purse. The way Kayla's smile probably faltered before she even saw what was inside. And Jeremy? I don't know, maybe he stood up, maybe he stayed seated. Maybe he grabbed his phone and stormed out back. But Ava would have read it aloud. I knew that girl. She wouldn't keep a truth like that to herself. They'd finally hear me, even if I wasn't in the room. And that's the thing about power. When you've truly claimed it, you don't need to shout. You just need to pass the right envelope at the right time and let the silence speak for you. Ava didn't tell me what happened that night. She didn't need to. But 2 days later, I got a message from Linda's niece who works at the bakery where Kayla special ordered the birthday cake. You should have seen her face, she texted. Looked like someone tipped over a crystal vase and forgot to catch it. I didn't reply. I just smiled and folded laundry while Linda hung sheets on the line like it was any other Tuesday. But later that afternoon, the phone rang. The landline. Not my cell. I don't give that number out much anymore. Grandma? Ava's voice was breathless, shaken. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. It's all right, baby, I said. Did you read it? She was quiet. Then, in a small voice, I read the whole thing. Out loud. I didn't mean to, but once I started, I couldn't stop. I sat down at the kitchen table, the line warm in my hand. They didn't know what to say, she continued. Dad just kept asking when you wrote it. Mom! She dropped her wine glass. It broke on the floor. I imagined that sound. A thin stem snapping, the quiet before anyone dares move. And you? I asked softly. A pause. I cried, she whispered. But not because I was sad. Just, it was the first time I felt like I mattered, like someone trusted me with something real. I closed my eyes. That girl had been growing up in a house where kindness had rules, and love came with footnotes. And still, she bloomed. I do trust you, Ava, I said. That was the whole point. She sniffled on the other end. They're angry. They kept saying it was just a phase, that you'll change your mind again. I won't, I said. They've had enough chances to show who they are. Now it's your turn. They're going to hate me. No, I said firmly. They'll resent you, maybe, but that's not the same as hate. And anyway, who they hate isn't your responsibility. Who you love is. There was a silence. Not heavy, but full. She understood. Will you still make the lavender cake for graduation? She asked. I chuckled. Baby, I already bought the good flour. She laughed, a real laugh this time. I could hear her wiping her cheeks. I love you, Grandma. I love you more. We hung up, and I knew something had changed. Not just for me, but for her. She had read my truth aloud. In that house. At that table. In front of the two people who had always expected silence from us. But we spoke. And from here on out, we'd keep speaking. That night, I wrote a new note and tucked it in a drawer with my trust documents. A final clause Raymond hadn't asked for, but one that mattered just as much. In the event Ava Doyle is ever challenged, silenced, or discredited regarding this trust, this letter shall stand as affirmation that she was chosen with full clarity, full love, and full intent. The next generation wouldn't wonder what I meant, because Ava had already said it out loud. The next morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. 26 missed calls. By noon, it was 72. By dinner time, 104. Jeremy, Kayla, unknown, no caller ID, even Jeremy's work number, like he thought professionalism could mask desperation. Each time I silenced the ringer, the buzzing started again, The screen blinking with more messages, more voicemails, more attempts to pull me back into the theater of their concern. Linda watched from across the kitchen table. Want me to take it out back and bury it? I smirked. Tempting. Instead, I poured myself a glass of cold seltzer and sat down with a notebook. One by one, I began listening. The first messages were light. Hey, Mom, just trying to get in touch. Can we talk? Then came the urgency. Mom, this is crazy. We need to sit down. Don't do anything permanent. Then the blame. I can't believe you'd put Ava in the middle of this. That's not fair. Then Kayla's voice, tight, rehearsed rage with just enough frosting. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is cruel. We have always tried to include you. Jeremy is hurt. By voicemail 39, her mask slipped entirely. You know what? If this is your way of punishing us, congratulations. You've made your point. But don't think for a second we're just going to let you destroy our family over some teenage girl with a savior complex. And finally, by voicemail 86. You are not thinking clearly, and if you don't rescind that document, we will contest it. We have rights. Oh, they'd reached the legal threat stage. Linda, now scrubbing carrots at the sink, muttered, They're in free fall. I nodded. Right where I need them. I saved every voicemail. Everyone. Downloaded and emailed them to Raymond with the subject line, For the file. No commentary. Just facts. Raymond replied within the hour. Received. I'll archive under estate defense. Let me know if you receive anything in writing. I turned off the phone after that. Left it in the bread box where no one ever thinks to look anymore. Because once you hear a person unravel in real time, begging, blaming, and finally threatening, there's no unhearing it, and no going back. That night, I made myself a small dinner. Broiled salmon, wild rice, and half an avocado. Ate it slow, while the wind rattled the shutters like an old friend. Linda joined me with a bowl of tomato soup and a crossword. You okay? She asked gently. I looked at her, really looked, and I realized I was. I'm not shaken, I said. I'm documented. The next morning I woke up rested. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't check my phone first. I checked my garden. The tomatoes were starting to bloom, and Kayla was finally wilting. I made the appointment 2 days later. Not with Raymond this time, but with the town notary. Same woman who notarized Richard's fishing license renewal 20 years ago, back when he still thought he could outsmart the trout. Her name's Trudy. Wears reading glasses on a chain and calls everyone under 70 Han. Want to tell me what this is? She asked, holding the envelope I'd labeled, Video Addendum to Living Trust. Personal record. It's a truce, I said. A permanent one. She gave me a soft look. All right then. Let's make it stick. She led me to a small room with an old camcorder on a tripod. Still records to digital tape, bless her heart. I didn't ask for fancy. I asked for official. We rolled tape. I sat straight, spine tall, no pearls, no makeup. Just a clean blouse and the look of a woman who no longer needed anyone's approval to be heard. My name is Beverly Doyle. I am of sound mind, and what I'm about to say is both true and deliberate. I am not being coerced. I have not been manipulated. And I am not confused. I have altered the contents of my will and trust because of ongoing emotional neglect, financial entitlement, and repeated incidents of humiliation directed at me by my son Jeremy Doyle and his wife Kayla Doyle. These decisions were not made in haste. They were made in clarity. I paused there. No tremble in my voice, just breath. I gave decades of my life to this family. Quietly, steadily, with love. I've been treated like an afterthought, a burden, a ghost in my own lineage. But ghosts don't write wills. Women do. And this woman is finished being invisible. I ended with my signature. Trudy had tears in her eyes when I handed her the copy to notarize. I wish my mama had done something like this, she whispered. I squeezed her hand. It's never too late to leave a trail. That video? It's now a permanent attachment to the trust. Raymond uploaded it to the digital record with a timestamp, notarization code, and witness affidavit. Legally, it's sealed. Emotionally? It's the nail in the coffin they thought they'd inherit from. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't need a show. But I knew Kayla saw it, because exactly 24 hours later, Linda showed me a screenshot from Kayla's close friend's story on social media, one of those curated little bubbles where they pretend honesty is bravery. A black background with white text. Family is complicated. Some people rewrite history to soothe their guilt. All we can do is protect our peace. Linda scoffed. Translation. She lost. I smiled, slow and certain. No, she finally realized I was never bluffing. Because when you go to a notary with your story, you're not gossiping anymore. You're testifying. And that record? It doesn't get deleted when the mood shifts. It doesn't bend when someone rewrites a caption. It lives, and I intend to live the rest of my days, knowing mine tells the truth. Ava's graduation dinner was held at the community center, just down the street from the high school. Nothing fancy, but it had folding chairs, string lights, and a punch bowl, enough to feel special without trying too hard. I wasn't planning to go, truly. But that afternoon, Ava sent me a photo of the table centerpiece, a mason jar of daisies, sitting next to a tiny card that read, "Reserved for Grandma Bev." I didn't text back. I just got dressed. I wore a navy blue dress, simple, clean, the same one I'd worn to Richard's retirement party. I pinned a small silver brooch to the collar, shaped like a compass. Linda drove me. Neither of us said much on the way there. She just reached over once, gave my knee a squeeze, and said, "It's time." When I walked in, heads turned. Not everyone, but enough. Jeremy saw me first. His expression tightened. Kayla's smile froze before it could settle into place. But Ava? That girl lit up like sunrise. She rushed over and hugged me so tight, I almost dropped my purse. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. "I didn't think I would either," I said. "But you saved me a seat." We sat. We ate. They made small speeches. Kayla stood and talked about Ava's growth, and how proud we all are of the choices she's made. Jeremy clapped like he meant it. But I watched Ava. She wasn't looking at them. She was looking at me. And then came dessert. And the open mic. Ava stood up, tapped her glass, and said, "Before we finish the night, I'd like my grandmother to say a few words, if she wants to." I didn't move right away, but slowly, steadily I stood. The room quieted. All forks paused. I walked to the front, heels clicking like punctuation. I didn't need a script. "Thank you," I said. I wasn't sure I belonged here tonight, but Ava reminded me, kindness doesn't require permission. A few folks nodded politely. Jeremy shifted in his chair. "I want to say something about worth," I continued, "about what it means to be told, by silence or by a laugh, that you are no longer needed. Some of you know that feeling. Some of you may have caused it." Now the room was still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't name names. I just told the truth. I have learned, later in life than I'd hoped, that love without respect is just performance. And I won't perform anymore. Not for tradition, not for appearances, and not for those who only call you family when it's convenient. That's when Jeremy stood up. "Okay, I think that's enough." But Ava, God bless that girl, stood up too, and stepped between us. She turned to him, voice shaking but firm. "Sit down, Dad." He froze. Not because he was afraid, but because she'd never said it before. "This woman built our family," Ava said. "You broke it." A murmur ran through the room. Kayla looked away. Jeremy sat down. And I felt my spine lengthen, like a tree finally stretching after years of pruning. I looked out over the faces, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some stunned. "I didn't come here to shame anyone," I said. "I came here to stand. That's all. Just stand." And then I sat back down. Ava took my hand under the table and squeezed it. That was the only applause I needed. It happened exactly 1 week later. The sun was high, the heat already rising off the pavement in lazy waves. Linda and I had been in the garden since morning, mulching around the peonies and pulling weeds like they were old regrets. Then the truck arrived. White, unmarked. Two men in matching blue shirts stepped out with a polished brass plate in their hands, wrapped in soft cloth. I wiped my hands on my apron and met them at the gate. "Doyle Legacy Foundation?" the taller one asked. "That's right," I said. "It goes just above the mailbox." He nodded, pulled out a drill, and got to work. The sign was simple. No flourish, no empty words, just my name, my husband's, Ava's future. Doyle Legacy Foundation, established 2025. Linda stood behind me on the porch, arms folded tight across her chest. "Well, I'll be damned," she whispered. "You really did it." "No," I said. "I undid it." I thought of everything that had led to this moment. Kayla's joke at the barbecue, Jeremy's silence, the empty calls, the roses that meant nothing, the voicemails full of panic and blame. All of it. And then I thought of Ava, her hands shaking as she read my words aloud, her voice cutting through years of dismissal. That girl didn't just inherit my house, she inherited my spine. By noon, the sign was up, the screws tight, the brass gleaming like something sacred. We were having lemonade on the porch when Jeremy's car drove by. I recognized the engine before I saw the license plate. He slowed. His window rolled down just enough for his eyes to scan the sign. He didn't stop, didn't wave. He just stared, like someone standing on the wrong side of a glass door, watching a life he'd never thought he could lose. And then he sped off. Linda didn't say anything. She just passed me the pitcher. I refilled my glass, took a long sip, and let the silence bloom between us like a final prayer. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was 2 days later. Small, private. Just Ava, me, Linda, and a representative from the literacy nonprofit we'd partnered with. We took photos in front of the sign. Ava wore a sundress with sunflowers and held the scissors with both hands. "I still can't believe it's real," she whispered. "It's been real for a long time," I said. "We just finally put a name to it." She looked up at me. "Thank you." "No," I said, gently brushing a curl from her face. "Thank you, you gave me back to myself." That night, I lit a candle by Richard's photo. "I did it, honey," I whispered. "Not just for me, for her." The house was quiet, the air still, but something settled inside me. Something peaceful and permanent. For years, I thought silence was strength, that keeping the peace meant keeping my mouth shut. But peace without truth is just a quiet war. Now, I have both, truth and peace. And my name, our name, is on the gate, not because of inheritance, but because of intention. Because we chose to be remembered not for what we endured, but for what we changed.